Good afternoon, everybody. This is Tim with Right Rudder Marketing. You are listening and watching the Right Rudder Marketing podcast. Looks like we're still connecting to some streaming services here. We have a special guest today. It's Tammy Barlette. She is owner of the company called Crosscheck. I won't give her too much of an introduction here. I'll let her kind of introduce herself. But yeah, how about you spend some time here, Tammy, and talk a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, well, I was a pilot in the Air Force for 20 years. I retired in 2018. I flew multiple aircraft. I flew the T-37 as instructor pilot first. Then I went on to fly the A-10. Then I had cervical spine reconstruction in 2006. So I transitioned into flying unmanned platforms. So I flew the Predator and the Reaper. And then I went back into the high G environment as an instructor pilot in the T-38, retiring in 2018. After that, I went into professional speaking. And in addition to that, over time, I've been studying mental performance training for athletes and shifting that content into the cockpit. And I now have a business where I teach mental performance training to pilots in an online course.
Wow. So that's quite the career there. Amazing. I guess keep going with your introduction here. What got you into, getting into the military? How did you join what spurred the spark to join the Air Force?
Yeah, well, I grew up in Minnesota, and there's not a lot of military there. I didn't have any family members in the military, but there was just something that drew me to it. I just decided I wanted to serve my country, and so I did some research and decided that Air Force was the way I wanted to go, and I wanted to do ROTC because I definitely wanted to go to college, and I already had so much college done in high school that I didn't want to go to the academy. I'm not saying I could have gotten in. I'm just saying I didn't even pursue that. So I went to look into Air Force ROTC, and one of the first questions they ask you, which is not surprising, but caught me off guard because I was just going to serve. They said, "Hey, well, do you want to be a pilot?" And I had never thought about that in my entire life because I didn't know any pilots. And it took me all of about 3 seconds to say, yes, I want to do that. That sounds awesome. And so that's the path I decided to go down, and I finished ROTC, and that's where I went. I went to pilot training at Laughlin Air Force Base. And then my first assignment out of pilot training was as an instructor pilot, which when you're on the fighter bomber track as a student, you don't really want to stay and have your life on pause, repeat, instructing other students for the next 3 years. You want to go fly your fighter jets. But to be truthful, it was the best assignment for me because I was so new to the military and so new to aviation. It was a really good thing for my life to kind of be absorbed into aviation a little bit more before I went on to fly the fighter jets. And that's where I learned that I absolutely love to teach, which is not surprising because my siblings are all teachers. So that's what I learned when I went there. Yeah.
Got it. And then, so you joined directly into, I guess, as an officer into the military, and then from there you did the instructing, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
So
I did.
I guess.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Go
Okay,
ahead.
keep going. Yeah, my bad. I was about to say, do you went the ROTC route? For people that are trying to get into the military aviation, what's your kind of recommendation to get in, and like what's some realistic expectations they can have if they choose to go to the military route?
Well, if someone wants to fly in the Air Force, you need to be an officer because pilots are officers. So your options are the Air Force Academy, then you can also go ROTC or you can go to OTS. And so the Air Force Academy, they'll get priority over the pilot slots. So if you really want more of a guarantee, then the Air Force Academy is the way to go. Obviously, it's very difficult to get in there, but there's lots of things you can do to make yourself better, to be more competitive to get in there. And then there's Air Force ROTC. I chose that path for me. Obviously, you heard one of the reasons was I had so much college done already. So I was only in ROTC for 3 years after high school before I had my degree. But I just wanted to experience a more standard college life. And if you're someone who already has if you already have college under your belt and you're done with that, you can go to OTS, the Officer Training School.
Yeah,
So
because I was actually looking into it like a while ago before I turned 33. I was like, oh, maybe I should get into the military aviation, and I was looking at the the what do you call it, the OTS
Hmm.
route. I think there's
Yeah.
other routes too, I've heard. So yeah, Route C. I think my sister, she goes to Embry Riddle actually, and then there's a lot of people that are in the ROTC route, and they're trying to join the Air Force after that. Another
Hmm.
one that I've heard that's not very popularized, and I don't know what your take on this one is like the reserve route. So going in and like talking to some reserves and trying to get a class date through them, just kind of circumventing that, and then obviously you still have to go to like OTS and all this stuff. I think if you go this route too, but instead of going like direct in, you go as a reserve member, and they do you do the training with them. And I'm not too well versed about it, but I think that's another way to get into that. I don't know.
It is. I mean, if that's what you want to go to the reserve or the guard. So when I showed up at pilot training, there's a bunch of us there's like 30 of us in a class, and we're like, oh, where did you come from? What are you doing? And a couple guys were like, oh yeah, I'm reserves. I'm going back to fly F-16s at wherever. I'm like, you already know? And we were like, oh,
Yeah.
we didn't know about this option. So, but it's kind of, you have to like rush those squadrons and get to know those people, and they
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
to, they have to meet you and go, yeah, we want to send you through. We think you're going to make it through, and we
Right.
want you to come back and fly, this for us when you get back from training.
That's right.
Yep.
You have to like connect with them ahead of time. So there's
Right.
like these camp dates or something like that. You meet the squadron, and then you kind of talk with them, and then like you said, you rush them, or so like they have to sponsor you to go into the next step. I believe if that's correct. So,
Yeah,
um,
I don't know a ton about it. I was actually in both the guard and reserve, but it was after active duty. So when I got off active
mhm.
duty, I went full time in the guard here in Arizona, flying the Predator, and then I just transitioned to the reserves, flying down in Texas at pilot training, teaching in the T-38. But again, it was different because I was already active duty transitioning into the guard and the reserves.
Wow. After so you had a very fruitful military career, and then did you what? I guess I don't know if this is off limits. What spurred you to I guess retire and then move on to I guess the private sector? Working and doing public speaking and doing mental performance training.
Right. I loved being in the military. I love working. I love being busy. So it was great for me. But the reason I got out was because I have three kids, and they're essentially 17, 16, and 11. And my husband is in the Border Patrol. And it's really complicated to have both of our full-time careers and, the kids and their sports and all that. So we just decided that once I hit 20, that I would be the one that retires. And so he's still working for the Border Patrol. So
Mhm.
that's why I retired at 20. It wasn't because I was done. I mean, I loved it and I
Okay.
loved teaching, but I retired, and it was a couple years actually before I retired that my husband had said to me, "Hey, I know what you're going to do when you retire, or what you should do when you retire." And I thought, "Oh, this is going to be interesting. What is this?" And he looked at me and he said, "Motivational speaking." And I got a little nauseous, and I thought to myself, no way. I don't want to be in the limelight. I'm not a big fan of that. I'd rather just stay in the background and make a really good number two and make somebody else look good. I'm totally fine with that. Um, so I instantly thought no, but he planted a seed. And what happened is that I noticed that there's so many people that, they retire, and I'm going to gender stereotype here, but especially women that, don't talk about what they did and quietly go off into the night, and we're going to be humble and we're not going to say anything. And I get there's humility in that, but also when we all do that and we don't ever talk about what we do, then our stories don't get shared. And, basically the idea is the path that we just burned gets grown over and unlit, and somebody has to blaze a trail again. And so the idea in my mind was, I can help people and I can share my story. It's kind of when I realized it was a disservice to not share my story to help others, then I realized I could get up on stage at that point because it seemed selfless and not selfish. And so I pursued that path as a way to make an impact in a lot of lives, because I do have a very unique story. I mean, to me, it was just my life. I just chose a very unique path. But from other people's perspectives, they enjoy hearing some of the things I've done, which is why I chose to do it for others, not because I really want to, everybody hear my story. I don't care about that at all. So I started going into professional speaking. But what happened is my keynote is all on perseverance. And over the years, it's changed. But the idea is you can't help other people in a keynote speech if you don't know how you did it. Like, how did I persevere through all these things? And what happened was I realized that a lot of the techniques and things I had been using for myself and to train my students were techniques that are used in mental performance training. And so I started studying that. And that's why I got interested in that. And my keynote has actually morphed into how everybody really needs to be using mental performance training just for life. There's so many good tools inside of the techniques and things that are taught in mental performance training. And so then I was gonna start a podcast, but then I realized I had nowhere to send people. You know, if I talked about mental performance training for aviators, I had nowhere to send them to give them more help. And so I stopped and I created my online course, and it's been great. I mean, it's been so heartwarming to see the changes in people when they take the course. And it's for anyone who wants to level up. It can be a struggling student. It can be someone switching seats in an aircraft, you know, they're upgrading and they're kind of nervous about it. Could be someone who just knows they could perform better if they had better, you know, like control of what's going on in their own head, and they just want to be the best they can be. Because the idea is that elite athletes are using these techniques, and it's the one thing that's really differentiating, you know, the great from the even better than that kind of concept.
Let's break that down a little bit more. So let's talk about what is mental. You know, you came to me a couple months ago and we talked for a bit, and that's the first time I've ever heard of mental performance training. At first I thought it was like kind of like the medical system or something like that and going through like therapy or something. But I think that's, after talking to you for a bit, it's definitely not that at all. It's something completely different. So maybe you can kind of share with us what is mental performance training, and maybe kind of divulge some of those secrets of how to become not better, but best, you know?
Yeah, of course. I mean, so mental performance training is really all about maximizing your performance, because a lot of times our mind is what gets in our way, right? It's the one thing that's stopping us. So if we're looking at an overview of kind of what do we talk about inside this course, or what is taught in mental performance training, it's things like, how do you increase your focus? How do you not get distracted? How do you get over failures? How do you deal with anxiety? And I'm not even talking like anxiety when people think about someone who has anxiety. We're just talking about like momentary anxiety, or, you know, stresses over doing an ILS, or did I turn in holding right? You know, like things like even just like that. How to truly get over failures and turn failures into successes. Because I think there's a lot of cliches around, you know, oh, fail forward and failure is part of the process and all. There's a lot of that. Those are all good things, but no one tells you how. Like, how do you do that? And like, how do you get over perfectionism? How do you get over your mistakes? Like a lot of these things, there's instructors out there already teaching that you should do these things, but the how is missing. And that's what happens inside the course. There's very small little adjustments you make over the course of the 4 weeks that I teach that over time can make a significant difference. And it all starts with, bottom line is self-awareness. Self-awareness, I say in the course, self-awareness is a superpower.
Mm-hmm. Let's take, there's a lot of different points you had there. One of them was, I think, focus. So you had, let's take all those points and kind of drill down each one. So I think the first one you mentioned is focus. How do you increase focus? I don't know. What are some tips and tricks to increase focus?
Well, the quickest one I can share just in this short period of time is a technique where it's literally just 2 words. And it's very simple, and there's much more to it if you were to, you know, dive more into this. I mean, we don't have time now, but the best thing I can tell you is a lot of times what's happening with focus is we are either getting stuck in the past and a mistake that we just made. And we all understand intellectually that's not helpful. Like for me to be like, oh my gosh, did I just screw up this landing so bad that I failed this check ride or this ride or whatever it is we just did. And this doesn't even just have to be for pilots. It can be for anyone. We get stuck going, oh my gosh, what did I just do? Or we're stuck looking into the future going, what if this happens? What if that happens? What if? And there's a time and a place that what ifs are good, but not in that moment. You need to be in your present moment doing what you're supposed to be doing right now. So how do you bring your brain to the present moment? Well, one great technique is practicing on the ground. And there's a technique I teach in the course called the recage technique, which I can't get into here. But the idea is if you practice on the ground, bringing your mind to the place you want it to be, it is more likely to respond that way in the air when you're like, nope, I don't want you back there. I want you here. But for those out there who are looking for the quickest technique, you can say 2 words to yourself. Instead of saying, what if, or what just happened, you need to say tell your mind, go, what now? What now? And it's a small enough, quick enough thing, but it's profound enough where your brain goes, oh, what now? What am I doing now? What now? And so if you have those 2 words ready to go when you get bogged down with something, or your mind's not where it should be, obviously just that technique alone is not going to be, the best you can do, but it is something, and it is very helpful. And as you practice it more, you'll be able to bring your mind more to, okay, what now? What do I need to do right now? And it's honestly the more active version of aviate, navigate, communicate. So I know that that's very, like when I got taught that technique as a young pilot, I thought, why do I have to memorize this? I mean, that seems obvious. Aviate, navigate, communicate. But when you're under stress and you literally feels like you don't have access to your entire brain, sometimes you just you need those things so I've been in situations where I'm like, aviate, okay, fly the plane, don't hit the ground, don't hit anything, attach to the ground on another aircraft and fly to safe airspeed where I'm going to keep this thing airborne. I'm literally just thinking about don't die. And that sounds so silly, but you have to break things down when you get overwhelmed. So, okay, that's what I'm gonna do. And then once that's done, then you can navigate, then you can communicate. It's so the what now is the quickest version to grab access to that.
Got it. What now? So what now?
What now? What am I doing right now? What now?
The next one you kind of mentioned, was, I guess, fear of failure and anxiety, if I remember this right.
Yeah.
So I think at one point, like you said, fail forward or 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, or something like that. Those are all cliches we've heard, especially as business owners. We kind of embrace the suck, and that's kind of what I've kind of done. I know that there's gonna be times in my business where it's not gonna go good. I know there's gonna be failures along the route, and I just kind of, you have to be resilient, and I just kind of train my body or my mind to do it. I'm kind of interested to hear what your take is on, being able to overcome failures, and also, the anxiety of the failure. How do we tackle those?
Right. And so, yeah, you're hitting on 2 different things, and I'll break them apart. So there's the front side of it, the fear of failure, right? And then there's the back side of it. How do I deal with failure once it has happened? So fear of failure, I would say the best thing you can do, and I'll expand on this because just saying this, people will be like, yeah, of course, is preparation. So there's preparation on multiple levels. You have preparation for the thing that you're doing. Most of us will prepare with switches, buttons, general knowledge, weather, systems, that stuff people are very well prepared for. And they go fly and they practice their flying. That's great. But the thing we also need to think about, and Dr. Michael Gervais, a sport and performance psychologist that's world renowned, he talks about training your mind, your body, and your craft. Most people train their craft, or I call it their skill set. We spend a lot of time on that. That's the things I was just talking about. A lot of people train their body, or even if they don't, they understand that it matters. And so that also needs to be brought into preparation. Do you have enough sleep? Where are you mentally? Put all that, have you drank enough? Have you eaten? All those things play into it. And then there's preparing the mind, which a lot of people don't actually spend time working on. And we're not talking intellectual. We're not talking buttons and switches and knowledge. We're talking about your mind. So what does that mean in flying to me? So bridging it across from preparing for the buttons and the switches, there's the let's prepare for the what ifs. Pick 2 or 3 of the most likely what if scenarios that you can think of, those things that keep you up at night going, what if this happens? What am I going to do? If those thoughts are going through your mind, especially on a regular basis, you need to prepare for them in detail, step by step, how you're going to handle it. Because when you have a plan for what you're going to do if that thing happens, it allows your brain to release some of that anxiety, because now you can go, no, I'm not worried about how I'm going to handle it. I know how I'm going to handle it. You might still worry it might happen, but the anxiety level will go down because you have a plan. Now, the other thing I want to add here that makes the biggest difference a lot of people don't think about is preparing with how you want to think, feel, and respond as well. We're not just talking, what am I going to do in detail? We're talking about how do you want to think, feel, and respond. Picture that situation happening, and then you want to immerse yourself in that confident feeling. However it is you want to feel when that thing happens, you want to practice that when you picture it in your mind, so that if that thing happens, or even any situation that is unexpected that you're not ready for, you're more likely to respond that way because you've told your mind that's where we need to go. We need to, you need to think, feel, and respond, with being calm. And I'm not going to say you'll be as calm as you practiced, but you're much more likely to be calm and under control. You'll not freak out quite as much as, like some people do. If you've thought about it, you're like, okay, this is, because your mind's going to go, okay, this is what I need to bring forward for this. So that's the preparation piece of it. And we used to do a thing in the Air Force called stand-ups. And I used to think it was hazing. It really felt like hazing, because all the instructors would sit around the edge of the room. The students were in front of them, and then they'd give a very specific scenario. Hey, the winds are 130 at 10. You're on runway 13. You're rolling down the runway. You hit 80 knots and you see a red light in the cockpit. Lieutenant Barlette, you have the aircraft. And I would have to stand up in front of everybody with my checklist and my in-flight guide and go step by step in detail, everything I was going to do. And if I didn't do it right, I got sat down and I couldn't fly for the day. It's very nerve-wracking. But the cool thing about it is that it gives you so much stress, because social stress is one of the higher stresses we have, like performing in front of people, right? That's a huge anxiety. And it forces you to be able to perform and access all that information through the stress. So it was like practicing with the stress, which is a really powerful thing.
Got it. And then what happens after let's say, so this is preparing,
Yep.
and then also, like, if you're anxious about something, you need to prepare and have a plan B, visualize kind of where you are, how you feel at the current moment, and then imagine you're in that situation and what you're going to do, and have those outlined ahead of time. That way, when you do encounter it in the wild, you're able to act. I guess the flip end of that, the next part of that was, what happens when we do all the steps and we accidentally make a mistake and then we do fail. So then how do we overcome the fear, not the fear anymore, but the actual failure, and be able to get, pull ourselves back up and then, attack again? What's our next steps after we make a mistake, and then, how do we overcome our failures?
Well, actually, while we're flying, let's say it's a flying mistake, right? The first thing we need to do is compartmentalization. I mean, you have to let that go. You got to keep flying the plane. The tagline for my business is, because you can't just pull over on a cloud. You can't just stop. You have to keep going. So you have to let that mistake go and pave your way forward. What now? What now do I do? Because marinating and stewing in that mistake does not do you any good. In fact, it will likely make more mistakes and become more dangerous if you're not able to move on. So that's the first thing you need to do. And that's kind of where the what now comes in. And that's where that recage technique I tell you I teach in the course comes in. But now that, let's say you're on the ground and now you're like, whew, you kind of let it go and you're like, oh my gosh, what did I just do? People start beating themselves up, right? So there's a couple things that need to happen, in my opinion. One of the first things we need to do is once you get to a place where you can deal with the failure emotionally, like maybe it's like for me, it would when I would get home, I would deal with it emotionally, because otherwise, if you don't deal with how you feel about the failure or the mistake or whatever it is, I like to say that's like an enemies within, they end up building. And over time, these enemies within, they can multiply and they can take over. So you have to process it. You need to, whether it's, journaling, punching something, not someone, working out, crying, I don't care, talking to somebody, like process it. My natural instinct was to go right back into the books and study, but I typically didn't fail because I wasn't prepared. So something in my gut always told me, nope, you need to just process this mistake and just let it go. Be upset about it for a little bit so then you can move on. It's like taking a weight vest off so then you can progress quicker and more efficiently through that mistake and get past it. It did seem like a waste of time to my intellect, but I did it anyways. And the truth is, after learning what I learned, it will help you progress through that mistake quicker on the back side of it. So that's the first thing, process it. But the second thing is now we need to look at the mistake and figure out the root cause. What really happened? Like, why did it happen? Because mistakes are information. Mistakes should inform you. They don't define you. So one story I like to share that's a really good example of this is I call it the tale of two tail strikes. When I was creating the course, I interviewed a bunch of people, and one of the questions I asked them was one of the biggest mistakes you've made? And this one student said to me, oh, I had a tail strike. It was so bad. I don't even know I don't know what I was doing. I can't even believe I did it. I probably shouldn't even be flying. And they went on and on and on about this tail strike. And I was like, whoa, okay. Next person, I asked him, what was your biggest mistake? And this pilot says, well, I had a tail strike once. It was pretty bad. But, I learned that when you do X, Y happens. So I don't do X anymore. So this first person was defining themselves by this one big error. And the second person was using it to inform them. And you get to choose. You get to choose whether using that as information or using it to define yourself. And that's up to you. And a lot of people, I like to think of it as a lot of people have a bowl. Their mistakes are like bowls, like a bowl of crap. They carry them around because they think, okay, I have this bowl of crap and I don't want to do this again. So I need to hold on to this and make sure I don't do it again. But really what it is, you need to filter through that bowl of crap and get the gems out of the bottom, filter it like a strainer, and inside of it, get rid of the crap and there's gems in there. This is your root cause. This is the information. You dig out, why did that happen? Why did that happen? Keep saying, 5 whys or whatever until you get to what was really the cause of this so you can correct it. And that's your gem of information. It's easier to carry around this gem than it is a bowl of crap. And it's a lot easier to share it with people, which is what you should be doing in aviation. So people don't make the same mistakes you did. You need to let your ego go and you need to share it because you would want someone to teach you something like that, right? So that whole process of just learning from it and going, this is how we move on. Think of somebody doing a maze. Those mazes you do when you get to the restaurants and you're a kid?
Yeah.
Right, what I'm talking about?
Crayons? With the crayons, right? Crayons and chicken fingers. Crayons and chicken fingers.
You take your crayon and you go into a corner that's not the exit and you're like, oh, okay, you go back the other way. That's the same process. You just discovered that wasn't the way. I'm just going to go another way. That's all it is. We don't have to define ourselves by these failures that we have.
Yeah. You were mentioning, when you're talking about the story about the bowl of crap, I was literally visualizing a bowl of crap and you're washing water through and then just finding a diamond or something. I don't know.
Yeah, when I do it was very I have a bowl. I literally have a bowl with I use brown sugar, and then there's these gems in there. So that we wash water through it. And here's your gems of information. You can get rid of that other stuff. You don't need
get rid of the brown sugar, guys.
Yeah, get rid of that brown sugar. Yeah.
One of the most common failures I see, at least in in my current circle, because I work with flight schools and I'm also a pilot and student pilot, if you want to say that. We're always student pilots, right?
Absolutely.
One of the things I've seen that can really torment people, and myself included, is a check ride failure. This happens a lot, and it really hurts the egos or the mental state of the pilot taking the exam. And also, the CFI that endorsed that, hopefully, if it's a really good CFI, I would think that the CFI is going to, care a lot about the results of this check ride and not just say, oh, yeah, so he was good to go. I sent him off, whatever, it's his duty to fail or pass, whatever. It's his fault. I think most CFIs are, they have some commitment to their student. And then if they do fail, then it's okay, well, what did I do as a CFI? And why did I what could I have done to make, my training better and things like that? So I guess kind of take the same thing you're talking about, straining the bowl of crap and everything. How would you apply that to, students that might have recently failed check ride or CFIs that have endorsed students that recently failed a check ride?
I think some of it is that, the expectation management is huge in life in general. And, a lot of times we don't think about what is the expectation versus what is the outcome. And, I think some of it on the front side of preparing for a check ride is, most CFIs, most DPEs aren't, I'm not going to speak for every single, there's nothing that's an all or nothing, right? But they want you to pass. They're not out there to try and get you to fail, but they have to keep the skies safe, right? And so they're on your side as far as, you're going to make some mistakes. There's not going to be a perfect check ride. There's not going to be a perfect flight even. In fact, I think that there's a lot of people who, especially in aviation, people who get drawn to aviation they're perfectionists. And this is another thing that we always talk about in this field is perfectionism. And the one thing I'd always tell my students is there's no perfect flight. The only difference between you and me is how many mistakes you make and how big they are. I make them too. And when I'm flying and I make them, I will let my students know that was a mistake. This is how I'm recovering. And they see me not only fix it physically, but they see how I handle it and process it mentally and how I move on. And that, I think, can be a lot of how we need to train people going forward, in a check rise, and make sure they understand that mistakes are okay. In fact, some of what you're getting evaluated on is how are you correcting the smaller mistakes so they don't turn into the bigger mistakes. Because a lot of times what happens is people make small mistakes. They have this perfectionism mentality. They start beating themselves up about it. Now they're not distracted, or now they're distracted. They're not focused, and they make bigger mistakes because they're still thinking about the other mistake. They just, so it's a matter of just understanding there's no perfectionism, and that, and going back to, again, I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but our mistakes don't define us. So if you bust a check ride, I would say a lot of times it's like one item hook, right? Like something I can't pass you on this. This was unsafe. And, I'm sure, can do it fine. Go get some retraining on it and it'll be fine. But that mistake does not define you. That one moment doesn't mean that you're a bad pilot. It just means you made a mistake. And I think that's a lot of what we need to have going forward. Everyone at some point typically will bust a check ride at some point,
Definitely.
So
you talk about, these small mistakes, but let's talk about recently. So recently there's in the news, the aviation industry as a whole is kind of under fire with the recent accidents, I guess you can say. I don't know if you can call them accidents, crashes, whatever you want to call it. How can we as pilots in the current industry and leaders in the industry prevent, the big mistakes from happening? And so I think part of it is like nipping in the bud the small mistakes, right?
Right. Yeah. I don't know. Obviously, you have to wait for all the safety investigation stuff to come out. But just historically speaking, how do we prevent that kind of stuff? And you're right. Small mistakes. I think there's a lot to be said about speaking up. Whether you're the one who needs to, maybe you're the co-pilot and you need to speak up about something because you're unsure. But it's also the job, of whoever's in charge, the aircraft commander, to create an environment where people feel like they can speak up. Like, for example, this is kind of a silly example, but I'll be driving with my daughter and she'll go, "Mom, you're curving, you're going out of the lane." And initially I would be like, "I got it. Hold on. I knew that was going to happen. I'm just like getting my drink. Just hold on. Like, there's no one coming." But I don't do that. I stop and I go, "Thank you." I go, "I had it, but that's fine. You should always say something." So there's the environment of that. There's how are we mentally? Where are we at? Yeah. I know that's a big hot topic lately as far as like mental health and stressors in outside life. How are we dealing with our own stressors? And there's that, and there's, again, expectations. What is the expectation? So if there's a pilot who thinks they should be able to do X, Y, and Z, but they're feeling uncomfortable about it, they don't want to speak up because maybe I know I should know that, so I'm not going to ask about it, because then maybe we need to just get over that, right? There's a lot of stuff to know in aviation, and sometimes we're not going to know everything all the time. And sometimes we're like, "Man, I'm struggling remembering, I need to go refresh on this." Do it. It's fine. We all have different limits, and our limits change. Like, there are some days that I know when I would go fly and I'm like, "Okay, my buffer is, I'm going to use a bigger buffer today because I'm just not as with it, like I'm not as sharp today." And then there are other days I just would choose not to fly, and there's so many things that play into it. But yeah, recognizing the small mistakes, not blowing them off, and seeing if is it leading to something else? Is there something else we're missing? I would rather do overkill on mistakes and be like, "Oh yeah, okay, it's nothing," than to look back and go, "Oh because I've had that happen. Like, I was like, oh, that, that was a clue and I missed it.
Hmm. The I think one of the things you said is about speaking up, having the courage to speak up. So especially in some, let's say, airline operations, you have, the captain, first officer, and the captain might have this personality, whatever. Um, Sometimes the first officer, especially with a lot of newer, younger pilots, they're less, they have less courage, or they don't want to, step on anyone's toes. In the name of saving face, right? They might
Right.
catch a big mistake, but they want to save face. And how do we as an industry get over that and call a mistake for what it is and be able to have the courage to talk to, it doesn't matter if someone's above you as a captain or the PIC of the aircraft. You have a duty on board as a necessary crew member to let them know, or to start making actions if there is something that is threatening the safety of that flight, right? So how do we as an industry, I guess, encourage people to speak up and have the courage to talk to call out mistakes and call out aviation safety issues?
Well, I think one of the ways is, and I know it can get hard, especially like in the airlines here, doing briefs and debriefs. We can't maybe necessarily do it like we do in the Air Force, where there's a half-hour briefing and there's this big long debrief after. But there needs to be some built-in accountability process that happens whether things went well or things went bad. Like, did it go well because of luck, or did it really go well because it went well? Because you want to know that too. So if you have a built-in process where you just go over these things and it's no, like, there's no rank, like, I want you to speak up. And that's where I was saying, where the aircraft commander or the captain is really in charge of creating that environment, where I used to call it social courage. Like, I could go put my life on the line, but sometimes I have really low levels of social courage. Like, courage in general, yes. Social courage, because and I hate this about myself, but I worry about what other people think. And I know that's very common, so that's why I talk about it, because I'm not the only one who feels that way. But I also know that it's dangerous. It's dangerous for me to put my ego in a place where I'm like, well, I know if I ask that and I'm wrong, then they might think I'm stupid and I should know that. And they might say, I can't believe you don't know that, or whatever. But when it comes to your lives and people behind you or whatever, you need to get over that. Like, we need to and ask those questions if you're the person who's like in lesser authority. And if you're the one who's in charge, make sure that when someone does ask those questions, that it's, you redirect them to, if they're wrong, to be like, hey, maybe you should brush up on this. You can make it a way where they actually want to go get better and they don't feel stupid, because they're more likely to correct it if they don't feel like an idiot. Because most people don't try to be idiots. I mean, there's some out there. We can.
I don't know. There's some people that
I
want
can't.
to act a fool.
In general, people are not trying to suck. So let's just treat them like that. Like, let's treat them that they're trying to do their best. And if they need help, then you should help them. And like, creating that environment where people can ask those questions, people can speak up and not be intimidated. Like, I always tell people, hey, if you think I'm doing something wrong, or it looks, speak up. Like, I might initially react and then I'm like, wait, no, I told you to do that. Like I do with my daughter. Like, yeah, no, that was good. You need to call me out. That, I know that can be tough. So it's all the people in that, aircraft need to work together to create that environment. And it stems from the top down, right? The processes and the attitudes and the environments. Yeah, that's a big question you asked me.
It's a big. I will say, you bring up the example of, you're driving with your daughter, and she corrects you, saying, "Hey, you're swerving," or something like that, and you take it, you accept it, and you say, "Thank you for letting me know, and I'm correcting it right now." I can't say the same thing with my family, unfortunately. So if, let's say, my wife is driving, and she's gonna hate me for saying this. My wife's driving. I'm like, "Hey, you're swerving." She's like, "I'm driving. You don't need to tell me anything." I'm like, okay, I'm sorry. I learned not to, say anything unless it's like a critical safety thing. I'm like, "Hey, your headlights are, we're driving at nighttime with your headlights off. You got to turn them on." I mean, like, I'll start speaking up if it's a safety thing. But if it's like, okay, we're swerving a little bit, but she got it. Okay, she got it.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because, like, I think this happens with a lot of couples, but my husband will be driving and, like, I'm not sure if he's seeing, hey, that person's, they're slowing down in front of you, like on the highway, right? And he'll be like, I know. And then, or something happens and I'm like, oh, I saw that coming. He's like, why didn't you say anything? I'm like, oh my God. So I finally just talked to him.
Oh,
I said, dude, you can't have it both ways. So he's gotten better about me saying stuff, even if he's seeing it, because I don't know that he's seeing. So that's the same kind of concept needs to happen in cockpits too, right? Like I may be seeing it, but let's just create this environment where, oh, good, you see it too. We're on the same page. Sweet. It's not a criticism. It's just a, hey, are we all on the same page? Because
I bring that up, and so I'll bring my parents up too because they have the same issue with like my mom screaming at my dad for driving, whatever. My wife is actually listening, and she says, I hear you. I'm sorry. um, Well, let's go back to the kind of, you mentioned that you have a keynote. So right now the current topic is perseverance. Is that correct?
well, it
Um,
has
ca-
an underlying
is it-
theme is perseverance, but
okay, it's morphed over time though. So kind of give us some
yeah.
insight of what's your. So first off, you do public speaking, and people, I guess, choose to have you bring on what first off, before we get into the content of your keynote,
Huh?
um, what who's your typical customers, or who's the typical groups that ask you to speak? I guess is the first question.
Yeah, I don't have one particular industry that's really like I've spoke, at Caterpillar, and I spoke at Garmin, and I've been at, um, the North Texas Business Aviation Association. Like I've been at lots of places. I've spoken at Napa Fire Chiefs and kind of all over the place. I've been at police departments, and I mean anybody really who wants a speech on perseverance. And then, how is the speech morphed? Because initially it was, some cool, unique stories about my life, but really with a message. Like stories are fun, but they have to go somewhere. There has to be a point to it. So really, the point was, hey, don't quit. That's like the overall theme. But how do you not quit? There's more to just don't quit. Like people ask me that, how do you not quit? And so I go into a few different things. I talk about preparation. We kind of already covered that.
Hmm.
Preparing, and basically for the expected and the unexpected. And like I said, to include how you want to think, feel, and respond. That's what I call the elite. That's the elite level of preparation. And then I talk about the enemies within, because it's really important that we deal with what's happening inside of us. A lot of us are like, nope, I'm done. I'm just going to push that down. We're seeing obviously a lot of that nowadays. That's bad. Like we have to deal with it. And the interesting thing about my mental performance training course is it's one of those things that the benefit of mental performance training is it's really good for your mental health. And so it can help you kind of stay in that healthy mind area. If you're starting to struggle with, some thoughts. I've had people take my class and go, "Oh, I didn't realize that these thoughts were really like spinning in my head, and I needed to get control of them." And it takes them to a better place. So it can be that step between, really needing some in-depth mental health support and healthy mind. So it can keep you that. So that's really good too. But you have to process through that stuff. That's the middle piece of it. And then the last piece of it is basically having a no quit mentality. Like to say, if you set a goal based on your own personal core values. And if you don't know what those are, I highly encourage you to figure them out. There's books. If you just look up personal core values, there's plenty of books you can choose from. But figuring out your own personal core values can give you a clearer path on where you want to go with life, what kind of tasks you want to take on, what things you want to do. But if you set a goal based on your own personal core values and nothing major has changed, when the challenges exceed your expectations, and they almost always will, you have to just keep going. You have to have that no quit mentality. I like to say, I will fail out before I ever bail out when it comes to, because the challenges are going to almost always, when it's worth it, going to be bigger than you expect them to be. So instead of seeing those challenges in your face and things that are testing you as a sign you're on the wrong path, you need to see that as a sign you're on the right path and face that challenge and come through it bigger and better on the other side. And that's usually what happens. And I learned that in the military, because I have a few stories of when I was younger. I quit some things. I look back, I'm like, man, what a quitter. But in the military, you can't really quit. And I learned that I could really do so much more than I thought I could, because I didn't have the option of quitting. I was forced to see what I could do. So it's a much harder thing to not quit when you have the choice But if you can establish those personal core values and establish that mentality of I'm not quitting, I'm going to run towards failure before anything else, you'll more often than not, you will not fail. You will be successful.
You mentioned earlier personal core values, and I kind of have my own, set of guiding principles and all stuff. And as a business owner, I've also set the core values for my company.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm pretty well versed in this. But I think many other maybe listeners or readers might not really know what that is. So first off, what is a core value, and what is a personal core value, and how does that play into the role of mental performance?
Well, it kind of establishes your path. I mean, like the thing it's helped me with a lot isn't I love helping people. So when people ask me for help, I'm more inclined to say, "Yep." Um, and I get overtasked. There's a lot of us out there probably that have this happen. But having these core values are important because it helps me determine what I'm going to do. So I read a book called Black Sheep by Brant Menswar, and it helps you figure out your personal core values. And mine are connection, impact, authenticity, integrity, and wisdom. And turning that into like a statement, so the statement is I create life-changing impact through authentic connection, thought, and action. And that's kind of my personal statement for life. So if the thing I'm trying to do doesn't fit in that and it's outside of the realm of those things, I know they're pretty broad, but they can be more specific for people. But that's if it doesn't fall inside of that, I'm just not going to do it. It's not in alignment with me, and it's easier to choose where I'm going to go based on knowing that those things are important to me.
Hmm. Yeah, it's kind of like you have to define what you value, which is why it's called a core value, and then work
Mhm.
towards that. So, like for example, like Right Rudder Marketing, our core values, fly at high speed. We work to help flight schools deliver and train more pilots by delivering, world class results. That's kind of my take on it, And I think it's
Mhm.
very important not only for the company to have, but also each person individually. Like, why am I? It's kind of answering one of the reasons. One of the acronyms we have is fly. So fly high
Mhm.
speed. It's F stands for future planning. Understanding like where I want to go. L stands for like leadership development, and then Y is the why. Like, why are you even doing this? Like, for example, if
Mhm.
you have let's say a web developer or an SEO specialist, why are you working on SEO? Why are you working on Google? Why do you enjoy aviation? Why are you working for Right Rudder Marketing? And I think the same thing for the aviation market. Why are you doing pilot training? I think it's a big good question to ask. Any student pilot or anyone that's in the industry is like,
Mhm.
why do we wake up every day and train? Why do we go and fly? For some people, it might be monetary. I'm not, that's not that's their prerogative. Other people, especially for the career CFIs, they want to give the gift of aviation to the next generation. Or flight school owners, kind of the same boat. Um,
Mhm.
but you have to define the why for each other, and that's how you kind of progress, I believe, as a company and as your internal self, right? So, um,
Yeah,
yeah. So we
it's
went
important.
over a lot. Sorry. You want to take it somewhere? You can go.
Oh, I was just gonna say it's really important for people. Like, let's say you're talking about why is someone learning to fly, like that you dig that out because
Hmm.
sometimes I've seen occasions where there are people who are flying not for themselves. And flying is too difficult and too dangerous for it not to be something you want to do. I mean, don't do it for your parents. And you might not even know that's the case until you start really digging out why do you want to fly, and then you realize it's not really something you want to do. And in fact, we actually have used my course as a way to get to that. If there's someone who's struggling in a training and they're will like everyone's out of ideas. Like we don't know what to do anymore. And they said, okay, why don't you take this course? Why don't you take Crosscheck, this building confidence in aviation course? And if they're not willing to take the course, because it's not for everybody, because you have to understand the power of your mind and how it matters. And so if someone's like, nah, then that's a good sign that they probably don't really want to be there. I know that sounds kind of weird, but you use it kind of as a weed out because there's been students who enroll in the course and then they don't do anything because they realize they don't want it so bad that they're willing to do some of the small tasks inside my course. My course is not a lot of work. It's just a lot of small things to change over time, like journaling and breathing. And like, that's some of the examples, but yeah, it's an interesting kind of weed out plan.
Let's go
Yeah,
over
you
some of
want
those
to know
activities
why you're
because I
doing
like.
it.
You want to know why you're doing it. Let's go over some of
Yeah.
those activities because I like those activities. So, what are some tips for? So you said journaling and breathing. I think those are two good techniques to use for stress relief. That's what I use it for.
Yeah.
I think breathing is kind of in the same realm of like meditation slash praying. I like to start a day with gratitude. That's one of the things I
Mhm.
like to do. What are the things that you got in your course? What do you focus on as far as, journaling and breathing and stuff like that? What are some of the techniques that you teach your students?
I mean, those are we start off the initial week is really about thought awareness because a lot of people don't really pay attention to what they're thinking, and that can really affect your subconscious, which significantly affects your performance without you even realizing it. So what you're saying consciously to yourself matters to your subconscious. It's one of those things like, where is your mind going, and are you just letting it go wherever it wants to go, or are you taking control of it? And the example I like to use is I ask people like, hey, have you ever trained a cat? And people are like, no. What? I say, well,
Train a
have you
dog.
trained a dog? And they, yeah, oh yeah. I'm like, how many of you would choose to not train a dog? And they're like, no, that's dumb. Most people train their thoughts, the thought part of their mind, like a cat. Like it's going to do what it wants, so I'm just going to let it do its thing because I can't control it anyways. So they treat it like a cat. When our minds are more like dogs, that if you don't train it, it will be difficult to control and all over the place, but you can train your mind. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So then we
I've
start with that. We start with thought awareness. That's where I say there's a lot of self-awareness that comes up through this course. Through the end of the course, people are like, wow, I didn't realize I was doing X or Y. So like there's different techniques. There's the breathing, there's the journaling, there's, how do we recognize successes? How do we make plans? How do we, and throughout the course too, each week has its own study techniques and tips that I give that are my biggest, best ones that I can give people. So they have better tools and techniques. And if they have an instructor that's not really briefing or debriefing them, which is sad, then I teach them techniques on how to do that themselves. So at least they're getting the best out of their training they possibly can.
Yeah, they should get a new instructor.
Yeah,
um,
that's true. Unfortunately, some of these people are in
yeah.
like little podunk places and there's not many
Yeah.
options. And I know you're right. You're 100%
Yeah.
right.
One of the things you talk about thought awareness, and I learned this actually in college. One of my friends recommended me a book. It's called Untethered Soul, I think, by Michael Singer, and I read it a couple days, like a couple months ago, and I was like, that doesn't really apply anymore. But when I first read it, it was really like mind changing because what happens is it teaches you to like your mind is just like a hamster on a wheel. It's just always kind of running back and forth, thinking about, hey, did I call Susie? Did I call Sally? Whatever.
Mhm.
Um, but then what happens is, you as a person or you as however you define you, you're able to kind of step back and see your thoughts or like you're the
Mhm.
you're the observer of your own
Right.
thoughts. And until you're able to step back and understand and observe yourself, you're not going to be able to control your thoughts. So I don't know.
Mhm.
That's kind of my take on the whole, self-awareness thing. And I recommend that book. And also I recommend checking out Crosscheck. Let's get into like who's, you mentioned you do public speaking. We're kind of wrapping up here. You have a course. Kind of give us the rundown of what the course is and who's it for? Like what's your ideal student? Who is that?
Great question. So there's not a certain level, like ability level, the course is defined for. It's it's for any pilot, whether you're 0 hour or I've had a 27,000 hour instructor take the course. But if you know that you could improve your mind, whether you know it because you're dealing with some anxieties or you just are curious on how can you level up even more, it's really good for any of that. And it's 4 weeks long. It's all virtual. So what will happen is if you sign up for the course, once it's released, it'll release one module per week. It's time released because I don't want you to watch everything in one day because it's not effective. It's small changes over time that makes the biggest difference. So what'll happen is it's 45 to 60 minutes of virtual content that is it's me teaching. Like you can watch that whenever you want. And then at the end of the week, there's a discussion group that's led by me or one of my other coaches. And it's awesome because you get to see how are other people using this content, and you get to see other people are in the same place as you, and you realize that you're all kind of the same, because a lot of times people feel alone in this journey and they're the only one feeling like that. And they can see that even I've felt like that. I share stories of failure and struggle, and you can see it's totally normal. So the 4 weeks will go like that. And they each week has an action item that's a mental performance training action item. And there's an aviation specific action item that's not homework per se. It's nothing like homework. It's not like a lot of work. Again, small changes you implement in your life over those 4 weeks. And it's about once a month. If you go to crosscheckmentalperformance.com, it'll
I was about to say, how do we register and how do we do this? So let's go through the call to action again. Crosscheck.com, or what is it?
Crosscheckmentalperformance.com. You can also go to tammybarlette.com, and it's on that same page as well. You can find it that way. And you can find me on LinkedIn. I like to post on LinkedIn some usable content on LinkedIn, and there's also links to the course and all that stuff. And yeah, I'd love to have people in my course. I love teaching this. It's like, I've definitely found my place, because I can't wait to get back in my office and study more and teach more and do more. It's just so amazing.
And then, so that's for the course. And then for speaking gig, how do they reach you? Is it tammybarlette.com as well?
Yep. You can email me, tammy@tammybarlette.com, or you can go on my website. And if anyone's interested in taking the course, if you use the code EMPOWER, you can get $50 off.
Oh, Empower, $50 off. Look at that.
Yeah, there you go. You can get a discount.
Cool. We're about to wrap up here. Do you have any last words for the audience and anyone else watching before we wrap up? And then we'll get going.
I just want to tell people you truly can achieve so much more than you think. And it's usually your mind that's stopping you. So just keep that in mind.
Yep. I think, and this is for business owners, I think the biggest limiting factor for us is really ourselves. It's really it's those mental roadblocks, right?
Absolutely.
So we're gonna wrap up here. I really appreciate Tammy hopping onto this podcast. You can reach her at tammybarlette.com. Also check out Crosscheck. If you're a flight school, or maybe you want to hop on this podcast yourself, you can give me a call, 314-804-1200. Check us out at rightruddermarketing.com. Send us an email, info@rightruddermarketing.com. Until then, we're excited to keep this podcast webinar stuff going. We'll see you guys next time.